And tonight, our guest speaker is Carmen Crothers from the Citizen Utility Board, Minnesota. They are a nonprofit advocate for Minnesota's utility consumers. With that, I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to Carmen to talk to us a little bit more about how to be a savvy energy consumer.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for attending this evening. I'm excited to be with you and really looking forward to all the questions you might have as we go through this talk. If we go on to the next slide, please. So we're not going to even cut, we'll just go through we will just skip the housekeeping slide in a minute, but kind of the rest of the evening, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about our organization so you kind of understand the perspective we're coming from and the role we're trying to play to help consumers make good decisions for their households. We're going to spend most of the time talking about your energy bill. So there were two really good previous presentations in this series that really focused a lot on energy efficiency. And we're hoping that this webinar is going to be a nice complement to that. So we encourage you to go back and view those other sessions if you didn't already attend those, because this perspective is really about how all these measures being more efficient and looking at how you operate your home hits your bottom line when it comes to your energy bill. So a slightly different spin on this, but we hope a really practical set of information for you to apply as you're living your life in your homes and trying to stay comfortable and save energy and save money all at the same time. We're going to also talk about different programs and rebates available to you as an energy consumer, and then we'll end with some steps to take and hopefully a lot of Q&A as well. So go on to the next slide. Okay, and so this is kind of, we've already talked about this, so please put lots of questions in the chat box and we'll have time after the talk as well to answer more questions. Go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so just a few minutes about the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota, which is also known as CUB, but not CUB Foods, separate organization. I've had people come up to me when we've been tabling in non-COVID times wondering if we're CUB Foods. I'm like, no snacks here, just energy tips. So we are a nonprofit independent consumer advocate. So we're not a utility, we're not a government agency. We operate primarily through donations and grants from foundations. And we exist to really be a consumer voice when it comes to energy issues affecting Minnesota residents. So we serve the entire state of Minnesota, and we work on both policy issues at the state level. So when there's legislation being proposed, we will potentially be involved in that depending on the topic as it relates to energy consumers. And also very active at the Public Utilities Commission. So if, I'm guessing most of you are probably City of Minnetonka residents, so you're served by Xcel Energy and CenterPoint Energy. And those are regulated utilities. They're regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. And because energy is a monopoly in Minnesota, we don't get to choose who our providers are. Our rates and programs can't just be developed willy-nilly. There's some oversight in that, because as consumers, we don't have a choice to change providers. So for the investor-owned utilities such as Xcel and CenterPoint, they have to get permission from the Public Utilities Commission when they want to raise rates, for example. So that's the type of work that we would get involved in as a consumer advocate. We also have an outreach side, which tonight is a great example of that, and that's the area that I work in, where we give a lot of educational presentations on a wide variety of topics. And we also give free energy bill consultations, which we'll talk about a little more at the end. But we sit down with people and find out how their home operates and give specific suggestions unique to your household about how you can reduce your energy use, save some money. A lot of people have environmental goals around energy use, so we can have discussions about that, what maybe renewable energy options might be a good fit for you. Any kind of energy related question, we're a great resource, and we will hook you up to other folks who have expertise in areas that are important to you. So we've been around for almost 5 years. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary. So still kind of new, but getting better known. Okay, and we will go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so now just touching on the importance of the energy bills. And so many of you probably know, like, it is an important part of your budget, but we like to explain how it's really part of your housing cost. When you think about all the things that go into running your household, whether you're a renter or an owner, the utilities are a piece of that. So if you rent, you have your rent that you pay, you may have some insurance, and you have utilities. Sometimes heat might be included, sometimes it might not, but that really comprises your housing costs. And then as a homeowner, it's mortgage, insurance, taxes, and utilities. So we say this because we run into folks that we talk to who maybe their rent or their mortgage isn't that high, but their utility costs are. So their overall housing costs are then become high. And when you have a large piece of your budget that goes towards energy, we call that energy burden, where it's a larger portion of your budget than it should be. And we're always kind of on the lookout for that to try to find ways to mitigate that for a household. So typically energy expenses are only about 3 to 4% of a budget. So not a huge part, but they can be a lot more. You know, they can be in excess of 10% for some households. And often these are the households that could be struggling economically. And that kind of comes from the fact that perhaps they're not living in the highest quality housing. So they may have a lower than average income, but higher than average energy bills because that housing isn't super efficient, or the heating system is old and inefficient, those types of things. So these are all things that we're kind of on the lookout for when we talk to people. And the amount that people pay on their bills are impacted by several factors. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so when we're meeting with people and we're literally looking at their energy bills and having a conversation, and we ask a number of questions because these are key factors that affect how high an energy bill might be. So one of the things we'll ask is, do you rent or own your home? And that's important because as an owner, you have more control over the things in your home, right? Especially when it comes to replacement. You're going to be the person that decides if you buy an Energy Star refrigerator or not, or a high efficient furnace or a new air conditioner. As a renter, you obviously have less control over things, but you might actually be responsible for all of those bills. So it's important to know, because we want to concentrate on what can you control and give you advice around that. The other factor is the age of home. So this isn't always a direct relationship, but it's kind of a clue. So in the state of Minnesota, there weren't always building codes. So when we have older homes, there's questions about like how much insulation, for example, might be in that home, or, you know, what was kind of the quality of construction. And when we're talking to people, understanding when their home was built can give us some good insight into like the likelihood of there maybe being some opportunities for more energy efficiency measures to be done. And so we'll ask questions about that and look at bills. And it could be like a home built in the 60s. Someone along the way may have been doing upgrades and improved it, or they may not. And so this is a factor that we're looking at. The number of occupants and their schedules is also key. So I'm guessing many of you are home a lot more than you would have been, say, a year ago, year and a half ago. And the more we're home, the more energy we're consuming. So we're finding a lot of people, you know, fairly obviously now are seeing higher bills. And so also so it's how often you're home, and then how many people are at home. So this COVID thing has been pretty interesting because we have more people at home than may have been before. So maybe there was always somebody home during the day, but now maybe instead of one person, there's 4 people or 5 people. And a lot of the opportunities to save energy are like turning down your thermostat during the day when you're gone. But if you're home all day, obviously you can't do that. So these kind of factors are important. The size of the home is also important. So, you know, typically the larger the home, the more there is to heat and cool. But this is where it becomes kind of interesting when you talk about age and size of home, because you could very well have a larger, newer home that consumes less energy than a smaller, older home that isn't well insulated. So these are all these are factors to be keeping in mind. And then the other area is how you're heating and cooling your home and what type of water heating system you have. So there's different levels of efficiency in heating and cooling systems, and how well they're maintained, how old they are. All of these factors will also influence how much energy your home's consuming. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, and this is kind of a nice transition into how does a typical home in Minnesota consume energy? And I'd love to hear in the chat, like what stands out when you look at this chart? Anything surprise you? See if anyone has any thoughts or comments. Heating and cooling, yeah, it's over half. That's a lot. So that is usually our number one go-to suggestion when we talk to people, is looking at their thermostat, adjusting their thermostat, because heating and cooling, because it's such a huge proportion of our energy use, it's usually the biggest opportunity for energy savings, is to make some tweaks around that. When I first saw this chart, I was personally surprised with water heating. 15% is pretty significant. We have another comment, electronics less than anticipated. Yes, and I think that's a really good point. I would love to see this chart for 2020 and see if electronics switches up a little bit. Because this is, as you can see from the table, from 2018, when we weren't home nearly as much as a lot of us are now. And typically all these gadgets that we're using, laptops, phones, tablets, individually, they tend to be pretty efficient. They don't use a lot of energy, but when you have a lot of them going all the time, it can add up. So we're kind of just coaching people to say, just making sure things are shut down, turned off when you're not using them. So again, it's all kind of about management. These things are necessary. So we're not going to say don't use them, but really try to kind of manage them the best you can. Another comment about appliances, and like relatively new appliances, again, are going to be using less energy than say a fridge that's 20 or 25 years old. So appliances includes things like stove, fridge, freezer, washer, dryer, those types of things. And then with LED light bulbs, yes, I believe it is, because since this is from, there's a question, is the lighting percentage with LED bulbs? Because it's from 2018, I'm assuming that it builds in a lot of LED light bulbs. And LED light bulbs are really interesting in that I don't have the chart in this particular presentation, but we sometimes show this chart where it talks about energy consumption over time. And it's like up, 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 basically if you imagine back to the 30s when the country was widely electrified. And then there's this dip in 2008, which is the recession. And then it kind of climbs back up again and plateaus and actually goes down a little bit. And that plateau and that downward movement has been attributed to LED light bulbs because they were so widely adopted. It actually had that big of an impact on our energy consumption. So just that simple technology, but what's great is they're easy to switch out, right? Like you only replace a refrigerator, like 10 to 15 years, maybe a little more frequently now. Your furnace every 20 years or so, but a light bulb you can switch out instantaneously, and it's not like you're doing something preemptively that's costing you money. You're not, you're getting your money's worth out of it. So really interesting impact of technology. Okay, now we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk about bills, and these. We can go back again. There we go. So hopefully these look a little familiar to you. I recognize a lot of people don't actually look at their bills. It's on auto pay, and unless it's really high, not a big deal. That's okay. But I encourage you after this talk to take a look, because I think you will have a little bit more insight. And again, I want to ask the folks attending, we're going to focus on the Xcel Energy bill. And this bar chart gives out a lot of really good information. And I want to see if any of you notice anything looking at the bar chart. Kind of looking at the trends, just to help you read it. It's from August to August, so it's 13 months, and it shows the electricity consumption over those months. So this isn't the price, this is the actual usage. I want to see if anyone has any observations, just looking at that chart, if anything stands out to you. Okay. Why do December, January go? Great question. Okay, so I'm glad you noticed I call that like a mini peak. So if you look at the two ends, it represents the summertime. And let's see, what was the other comment? Weather is a key factor. Yes, that's exactly right. So we'll start out at the ends and talk about those, and then we'll talk about the middle with the December, January little mini peak. So in the summertime, in the Twin Cities, the electricity usage tends to be the highest in the summer because of air conditioning, right? And so if we see a bill that's really flat, I usually assume someone either doesn't have air conditioning or they're not using it. And I'll ask just to confirm. But there's usually a pretty significant spike in the summer months because of air conditioning. And someone pointed out like the difference in the temperature. So this first August, you can see is a bit lower than the second August. If you go down to the chart below, you'll notice on average that second August was 2 degrees warmer. So we can kind of draw a conclusion that because it was warmer, this particular household probably used their air conditioning a bit more than they did the previous August. There could be some other factors going on. It could be like maybe they were gone a little bit in the previous August, more than they were this August. But generally, the temperature will have a really direct impact on bills. And you'll probably notice that in your upcoming heating bills from the last couple of weeks when we had really severe weather. So you'll notice it's pretty typical to see higher usage June, July, August, September because of air conditioning. And then this little mini peak that someone pointed out, December, January, and a little bit February, and then it kind of goes down again. So in the winter time, what do you think would be driving more electricity bills? Anyone have ideas they want to share? What could make a higher electricity bill in the winter? Hot tub. That would be nice. Yeah, it could be. It could be. We actually running the furnace blower. Yes, that is also a very good thing because lights, it gets dark earlier. Exactly. Typically, like even in non-COVID times, home more. Yes, you guys are reading my mind. This is all right on. These are the things that increase our electricity use a bit more. We're home more. We're using more electricity in these winter months. Even though you may have most people have gas furnaces, but you still need electricity to run the fan. If you have kind of a typical forced air furnace, a boiler is different, but a furnace, the fan's running. People will have more lights on. They might be baking more. They might be entertaining more. There might be therefore more people in the home. All of those things. We will occasionally see a really big spike. And that hot tub example could be an explanation for that if it's being heated by electricity. But the most common thing for a big spike is our space heaters. So they use a ton of energy. So we really encourage people, this is another thing about management, like that space heater might be very necessary for your comfort, but to manage it and not use it more than you need to is important. Like a lot of people in a lower level, for example, the heating systems, it's tough to like heat basements sometimes. So people will have a space heater for supplemental heat, or maybe they'll have an electric baseboard heating, or someone may have an addition where they didn't extend the ductwork out to that, but they use, a baseboard heat to supplement. All of those things, again, necessary for comfort, but really manage those because it can really add up. Electric heat can be very expensive. If you happen to be, if your primary source is electric heat, not just supplemental, there's special rates that Excel offers that can bring that cost down quite a bit. And also, your primary heating source isn't subject to sales tax from November to April. So reach out to me if you want more information on that. CenterPoint automatically takes off this, the sales tax, but Excel doesn't. You have to let them know if you do have primary electric heat. It's not super common, but it does happen. And we've talked to a number of people in the metro with that. Comment about holiday lights. Yep, hopefully they're LED lights and they won't use as much. but that contributes. And then is leaving the furnace fan on versus cycling with calls for heat or cool. So this is, I encourage people to experiment and see what works best for their home. So I personally just have mine on auto. So my furnace is going on and off just based on the temperature. I think a lot has to do with how the air is circulating around your home. So I encourage people just to experiment. Spend a day with it on, see how that feels. If that's kind of what you've typically been doing, spend a day with it off, like at kind of similar temperature levels, and see if you notice. So yeah, I think every home operates a little differently, and you know, people have different comfort requests and you know, things that that they need to feel comfortable, because this really is a balance of comfort and energy savings. So hopefully that answers that question. Now we'll quickly move on to the center point bill, because this is kind of opposite, right, of the electricity bill, where you clearly have the major spike in usage in the winter months from heating. But you'll notice in this example, there's also some additional natural gas being used in non-heating months. So what do you think what would that be? What else uses natural gas besides heating? And I'm guessing a bunch of you have these types of appliances in your homes. Yep, gas stove.
Water heater.
Water heater, yes. And remember, that's like 15% of our energy usage. This particular home, hot tubs again. Hot tubs are really popular. Dryer, yes. Yeah, and so I've seen a really high gas bill in the summer, and it was a pool. So you know, there's things like that so they heated the pool with gas, and it was a large amount in the summertime as well. So this particular home has a gas dryer, a gas water heater, and a gas stove top. And so that's why you see the usage in those non-heating months. But you can kind of estimate, like when you look at the usage in June, July, August, so that's all those kinds of appliances. Everything else you can assume is heating above that from those other months. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay. So you've probably never looked at your bill quite this way. I doubt that it comes color coded, but we did that for you. So you can kind of understand like what your bill is made up of and what you're actually paying for. So this is the Excel electricity bill. This is not from Minnetonka. So your taxes, and if you have taxes and fees, the part in blue is probably, could look a little bit different than this, but this is just a good example. So it's really broken up into fixed costs and variable costs. So the fixed costs they're just there. You can't impact them at all. So in this case, it's $8 just to have electricity at your home, the basic service charge. It's either $8 or $10. It'll depend on if the lines are overhead or underground, or there's certain rates where you might pay a little bit less. Like if you're on that electric heating rate that I mentioned, for example, that would be $10 instead of $8. And then you have the affordability charge. And you'll recall earlier in our talk, I talked about energy burden and how some households can really struggle to pay their energy bills. So there's actually a program that you help fund as a ratepayer where this affordability charge goes to. So you may be familiar with a program called Energy Assistance. It's an income-based program that helps people pay energy bills. That's a federal program. If you qualify for that federal program, Excel and Centerpoint offer 2 additional programs that help bring your bills down even further. For Excel, it's called Power On, and for Centerpoint, it's called the Gas Affordability Program. And what it does is this 98 cents that you contribute every month goes into a fund, and households that qualify, their bills are adjusted to be a certain percentage of their income to address that energy burden issue. And this is a really important program to help people, to prevent them from being shut off. That's just a really bad cycle to get into. And it helps people stay comfortable through our cold and warm months. So just like to point that out and let folks know that it's a very valuable program that everyone contributes just a little bit to. So then if we get to the variable costs, all of the costs in green are directly related to how much energy you consume. And as you're looking at the energy costs, notice there's actually a summer and a winter charge. And just, you know, in chat, if you want to say, did you know you were charged different rates in the summer versus the winter? A lot of people didn't know that. And you'll notice it's higher in the summer. And anyone have a guess as to why it's higher in the summer than in the winter? See if someone chirps in the chat, but you guys have been great at participating. I'll just say that the answer isn't hot tubs this time.
Source.
Lower line maintenance, okay? Other
Fuel
ideas?
Fuel source. Fuel source.
Field source? What do you mean by that? More demand. Okay, so someone said more demand in the summer. Yes, that is correct. It's an economics issue. The higher the demand, the higher the cost. So the greatest demand for electricity in our area is in the summertime. So we're actually charged more for the energy that we're using. And so the thing from a consumer standpoint is recognizing, okay, yes, we use more energy, typically use more electricity in the summertime, but we're also paying more for what we're using. So that's why you might notice a summer bill being even that much higher for electricity than in the winter time. And the Excel breaks it out specifically based on the month. So this particular bill straddles May and June. Summer rates start in June. It's June, July, August, September. The rest of the year is considered winter. And then are there different rates overnight versus the day as well? Great question. So there's actually a pilot program going on, and pieces of the city of Minnetonka are actually included in it. It's called a time of use rate, or I think, and Mike, you might be able to help me. Also, like flex pricing, I think is the name being used as well. And somebody can correct me if I don't have that quite right, where they're doing a pilot program to actually charge people at different times of the day that generally corresponds to the cost of producing energy at those times of the day. So for example, overnight energy is significantly less expensive than during the peak time of the day, which is from, if I'm remembering correctly, from 4 to 8. And that's the time when like everyone's using lots of different things. So, so great question. And so it'll be interesting with this pilot. It's possible that you're going to see more of these type of rate things being either offered or applied to our bills.
Carmen, you are right. There is a time of use and a flex pricing pilot programs are going on now. There's also some work in development that is trying to facilitate the fact that so many people with electric vehicles charge their cars overnight. And so it's a little bit of a more complex situation because you need a separate meter and all the rest, but there will be some more news coming on that as soon as they get all the details ironed out.
Great, thank you.
And I will add even another piece on top of this, that a part of Minnetonka is actually in that pilot program.
Yes, it is.
Minnetonka, and then it's a lot of like Eden Prairie and Chanhassen. So
yeah, and I actually met with a resident in Minnetonka right before this about the pilot was going to be starting, and we talked a little bit about strategies to really maximize the rate. Because if you can shift your use into these evening hours, or particularly the non-peak times, there's a good opportunity to actually save on your bills if you can manage things around that. The on-peak energy charge. So with this pilot program, it does not apply on the weekends. It's just during the weekdays that you have the highest peak charge. And we can, I don't know, Mike, would you be, or maybe Drew, would you be able to like quickly put in the chat the link to that time of use program on Excel's website? If not, I can do it after we get done with the presentation, just for people's reference. They have a really good website that explains the program and even gives tips about how to manage it well. Okay, good questions. Okay, so just moving on with some of these line items. So there's a fuel cost charge that's directly related to use, and this is a pass-through charge that Excel, where, you know, this is like the cost of providing the electricity. So, you know, the coal that's still being bought, the natural gas, et cetera. There's no profit made on this. It's just literally passed through to us as consumers. And then there's the decoupling adjustment, which is always a little bit of a challenge to describe. but this is kind of how I do it. So as an energy company, you know, Excel wants to sell their product, right, which is energy. So from a business standpoint, you'd want to sell more rather than less. However, we have, oh, thank you, Deidre. Great. That's the link to the, let's see. Yes, that's the link to the time of use rate. So thank you. So with the decoupling adjustment, you know, the utility is required to encourage us to be more efficient, which is kind of counter to what you'd want to be doing as a business person, right? You want to sell more of your product, not less. So Excel and Centerpoint have come up with a system approved by the Public Utilities Commission where they're kind of making an adjustment on our bills to even that out. So there's projections made related to like revenues of how much they can be collecting. And you know, my understanding is if they sell more than they expected, we get a credit on our bill. If they sell less than is expected, we get charged to make things even out. It's still in all of our interests as individual consumers to try to keep using less, right? But this helps kind of address that that tension, right, between the energy company having wanting to sell their product and also being required to encourage us to use less of their product. So I'll be happy to take questions about that later, but hopefully that makes sense. Is the adjustment unique for each household or consistent throughout the market? So the adjustment is based on your consumption, but I believe I'd have to confirm, but the rate should be consistent across the market. So if you had used 700 kilowatt hours instead of 923, that charge would have been less. But I believe the charge, the rate that you're charged is consistent, just is going to vary based on how many kilowatt hours you use. Okay, so good question. Let's see if there's other questions here that okay, I think we got everything now. Okay, and then I want to touch on a couple programs, the Saber Switch programs. These are excellent programs, super easy way for consumers to save energy. So for all of you that have central air conditioning, there is a program called the Residential Saver Switch that Excel offers. And we just talked about how most people have the highest bills in the summertime because of air conditioning, right? And our rates are higher in the summer. If you sign up for the Saver Switch, what Excel does is they put this little device on your air conditioner. And during peak periods of demand, they have the ability to turn things off and on to help control demand and manage the system. They compensate you for participating in this by giving you 15% off your bill all those 4 summer months, which is significant. So you see in this bill, for example, this consumer saved almost $18 by participating. Excel doesn't call these events very frequently, and if they do, they're going to be turning it off for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. They're not going to shut your air off the entire day, and they're going to be cycling it throughout the whole system. So we really encourage people to participate in this program. It's a helpful way to help manage the grid, and as a consumer, you're getting a really nice benefit. If you happen to have an electric water heater, there's a similar program. This is a little more involved because an electrician actually has to come inside of your home to install it, but Excel pays that cost. It doesn't cost you anything. And you save 2% on your electricity bill all year round. So again, another nice, easy savings. And again, it's helpful in helping control demand on the grid. The resource adjustment, I forgot to do the green altogether. This is another fund, and it funds a variety of programs, but what's important to you as a consumer is if you've ever gotten a rebate on your electricity, rebate on any kind of appliance or heating system, cooling system, this is where that money comes from. So we really encourage people, like when it's your turn or opportunity to get a rebate on something, and you get a rebate by buying an efficient version of a mechanical system or appliance, please take advantage of it because you've been paying for it all along. And again, it helps you, it helps the whole system by us all consuming less energy by buying something that's efficient. So if you're in the market for any of these things, check out the websites of both Excel and Centerpoint to see what the requirements are to be eligible for these rebates so that you know going in when you're shopping for something what you could get a rebate for.
And Carmen, Deirdre was kind enough to put the link to the Saber Switch page in the chat, so you have that there as well.
Excellent, thank you so much. This is very helpful. And then lastly, taxes and fees. And what I'll just say about this is it's different based on every community. It can look a little bit different, but keep in mind the subtotal. That's what your taxes and fees are based on. So the lower you can get that subtotal, the lower your taxes and fees are going to be as well. So extra little motivation to try to keep that energy use down. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so center point gas bill, we won't spend a lot of time because the concepts are very similar. You've got the basic service charge, and then everything else again is based on consumption. And so you'll see similar things. They have the decoupling adjustment. They have this cost of gas, which is a pass-through cost. They have the gas affordability program, just like we saw the affordability program in the electric bill. The one thing I want to point out here that you don't see on your Excel bill right now is this interim rate adjustment. And that means that it's basically a clue to you if you haven't, you aren't following the Public Utilities Commission closely, that CenterPoint has asked the Public Utilities Commission for permission to raise your rates. And in the interim, they're granted some permission to temporarily increase your rates until a decision is made. So that's the interim rate adjustment. If they get permission to increase your rates at this level or above this level, then once that decision is made, your rates will go up. If, and this has happened, the approval is actually for less than this interim rate, then you get a credit on your bill. So that's what that is about. And I just like to point that out because if you ever see that on your line, on a line item of your bill, it's just kind of a heads up that a rate increase has been requested. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, we've made reference to this a little bit, but I do want to kind of point out, and this, we thank our friends at the Center for Energy Environment for this information. As an energy consumer, these mechanical systems, furnaces, boilers, air conditioners, water heaters, we talked about they play an important role in your energy consumption. And we like to really encourage people to be thinking ahead about replacement of these items because they don't get replaced very frequently. So when they do, you want to know what you want and make a good decision and do some research, look at the rebates, look at the efficiency level, look at the cost, all of these types of things. So this is just a nice overview as you're thinking about, hopefully kind of planning ahead, and especially if you're a homeowner. These can be kind of big ticket items too, to understand what the expected lifespan of those. How does an on-demand water heater compare? I would have to do a little research to get you that in terms of what the expected lifespan is. But if, and Drew, are you able to put me in touch with, I can provide, what I can do is I can send that response to Drew, and then maybe Drew, you can share it. I don't know if you can share it with attendees. And energy savings in terms of the on-demand water heater. Okay, so the on-demand water heaters, there's a few considerations for people. You have to, one of the things is like, does it fit your lifestyle? So with a traditional tank water heater, the water's warmed up, ready to use, and it can absorb like multiple people wanting to use things at the same time, right? Until you use so much that it needs to kind of be recharged. The on-demand, one of the things is making sure that it can keep up with your demand. So like if you have everybody showering at the same time and doing laundry and stuff, an on-demand water heater might struggle to keep up and kind of do that thing. So we really encourage people to talk to contractors and get a sense of like, is this a good fit for your lifestyle? And even the way your house is set up too. Like, sometimes there's physical limitations, space limitations, like where is the hot water going to, all of these things. But there's actually a great resource from the Department of Commerce, a home energy guide. And it does a really good job of outlining all these different ways of like heating your water, heating your home. And I will I can get a link out to that to Drew too as well. That's a really nice overview, but I really encourage people to talk to professionals and get some advice as to what sorts of systems are going to be good fits both for your lifestyle and for your home in a physical way.
Hey, Carmen, on
Yeah.
the on-demand water heaters situation, oftentimes on-demand water heaters are a better fit in new construction than they are in water heater replacement because of the fact that they have to be vented differently. So the costs to accommodate that additional venting and installation are substantially higher than replacing a traditional water heater, and that affects your payback period. But along the way, there are also a couple of interesting solutions for peak demand as well. You can actually add a very small holding tank, like 10 gallons instead of 50, just to accommodate those peaks in demand.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, really good example of just lots of considerations to be thinking about. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, please. Okay. And again, I have made reference to these things, but just really want to emphasize that, take advantage of discount rebates that your utilities provide. So especially for these bigger ticket items, that can be pretty impactful. So furnace, boilers, water heaters, appliances, insulation and air sealing. So again, I encourage you to go back and listen to the presentations from the Center for Energy and Environment about making your home efficient. There's really good rebates available to help make these improvements less expensive for you. Things like light bulbs. If you're at a home improvement store or hardware store and you see kind of on the spot rebates, there's sometimes like an Excel sign or something on there. That's an example of a rebate that you've helped pay for through your energy bill. And then CenterPoint has a lot of really nice do-it-yourself materials that you can just request on their website, and they'll send them to you. So take advantage of those things. Okay, there's a comment here about, it sounds like somebody has an on-demand water heater. Yeah, and they were able to use the same stack and chimney to do that. So yeah, so that's great. So again, like good examples, like there can be good easy solutions. Other things might involve a little bit more work. We'll go on to the next slide, please. Okay, and then just again, a few other tips to mention. We really encourage people, especially if you have an older home or you're a new homeowner or your bills seem higher than average, to get a home energy assessment. And the Home Energy Squad, which provides assessments for CenterPoint and Excel customers, they're doing free virtual tours, free virtual assessments right now. And they have in-person audits as well. And these include a lot of free installs. It's a really good deal. And it's a great way, a comprehensive look at your home and how it's using energy. And also when you identify improvements to be made, look at a variety of financing options. City of Minnetonka has programs as well. Really shop around and try to find the best deal to finance some of these things. Some people can pay just upfront. Other people need to pay for it over time. So consider all of your options. We talked about the Saber switch programs already. Want to remind you to be servicing your heating system and your cooling system every year. It's a safety check for your heating system in particular. And it's also good preventative maintenance, because like you would not have wanted your furnace to go out 2 weeks ago, right? You do not want to have to make these big expensive decisions in the middle of a polar vortex. So it's good maintenance, it's good safety. It'll help you make your equipment run more effectively. I had mentioned that there's special rates for people who have electric heat and also for the EV charging too. So get familiar with different rates as your situation might be changing. And then just a reminder that there's no sales tax on your primary heating fuel. So again, CenterPoint does that automatically, but if you happen to have electric heat, you need to reach out to Excel and request that that be removed and to get on that special electric heat rate too. Okay, go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm gonna just go really quickly through some tips because we're getting a bit short on time. But really the message here is like the cleanest, cheapest energy is what you don't use in the first place. So really, really encouraging you to take easy, there's a lot of easy steps you can take to use less energy. And the opportunities to save vary a lot based on the season. We'll go on to the next slide, please. The question I think is, should I get my furnace serviced even if it's only 5 years old? Yes, please do. Again, it's a safety issue. Even a small carbon monoxide leak can be really, really harmful. So it's not that your furnace is necessarily going to need a lot of repair. It shouldn't at 5 years, but you still need that safety check and to get it cleaned out as well. Okay, so in the wintertime, again, we talked about over half our energy is heating and cooling. It's all about temperature control. That is really that's our number one recommendation is focusing on controlling your thermostat. So what's recommended is 68 when you're at home and up to 10 degrees when you're asleep or away. This is very much a personal preference issue. Some people want it at 70. That's fine. We just encourage you to say, drop it down to 69 and see if you notice. And if you don't, keep it at 69 because it's only going to save you some money. So just make small incremental changes and see where that balance between comfort and energy savings is. And never lower than 55. We always tell people, because if you haven't lived in a northern climate before, really important, you do not want to risk freezing pipes. That's bad news, as you can all imagine. And then also just use passive, easy things. So on a nice sunny day in the winter, open up those curtains, blinds, let the warm sun help heat up your home, wear layers. And we mentioned like trying to really manage any space heater use that you might have. We'll go on to the next slide. And then this is in the summertime, so it's a lot kind of the opposite is you want to wait till you turn your air conditioner on. If you can wait till it's 78 degrees inside, that's again what's recommended. Also recognize on a really humid day, 78 might feel uncomfortable. But again, just trying to manage it a degree or two at a time and using fans. A fan will make you feel up to 4 degrees cooler. So you could have the thermostat at 78 and you have a fan blowing on you and you'll feel like it's 74. It's the wind chill effect. So just an easy tip. And then you want to do the opposite with the sun. Keep that hot sun out and then take advantage of cool evenings and early mornings to open up the windows and just naturally be cooling your home. Again, it's about managing it, and plant trees for shade are excellent. So when we're talking to people who are planning new construction, that's something we talk about, like deciduous trees in the south are a nice strategy because they keep the roof cool. Unless you want to do solar, then you need to be thinking a little bit differently. But then in the wintertime, they lose their leaves and then that sun can come in the wintertime. So yeah, great comment. We'll go on to the next slide, please. And then just use your appliances efficiently. So you want to run full loads of laundry, dishes. A lot of dishwashers have a heated drying thing. You can just shut that off. This isn't going to save you a ton of energy, but you really don't need it. Open the door, let it air dry. It'll save a bit. Washing in cold water will use less energy because we talked about how much energy heating your water takes. You want full but not crowded refrigerators and freezers. You want the air to circulate around, but you don't want to necessarily be having it completely empty because that's not efficient either. So if you have like a chest freezer that maybe seasonally is full, but sometimes it's kind of empty, you could like fill up milk jugs and just stick it in there to take up some space because cold things help keep other things cold, right? You think of a cooler that you take to a picnic. It's the same concept with your fridge and freezer. And then you want to be vacuuming your refrigerator coils to make sure it's running efficiently too. And these are just little tips, easy things to do. And we'll go on to the next slide. I believe the next slides are talking about some help with bills. So we want to touch on if you're struggling to keep up with your bills or a couple other tips. Yeah, we talked a little bit about unplugging electronics when they're not using, because they're still drawing a little bit of power. So really shutting things down or unplugging them. Power strips are a great way to do that. And then of course, using LED light bulbs. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about energy bills. With COVID, there's a lot of households struggling right now to keep up with things, and being home more, energy bills are higher than normal also. So in case you didn't know, we just wanted to reassure you that during the governor's peacetime emergency, CenterPoint and Excel are not shutting anybody off for non-payment. They're not charging late fees, and they're working with their clients to arrange payment plans. So at whatever point the peacetime emergency ends, the utilities have promised to give 60 days notice until they would resume any disconnections. So if you happen to be falling behind on your bills, I just want you to kind of be aware of this and know that there's some time, but encourage you also to reach out to the utility and work on setting up a payment plan of something that you can stick to and not let these bills build up too high. There's some programs being proposed that potentially could provide some relief for past due bills, but those haven't been approved yet. They're still just in discussion. But we'll have information on our website when decisions are made about that. If we go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some help available for paying bills. So I had mentioned energy assistance. This is that federal program, and it's based on income level and household size. So this is the 2021 guidelines. So if you think you fit into this category, you can reach out to the Community Action Partnership of Hennepin County and apply for this. They have just increased the amount of funding available for this program. So really strongly encourage you, if you're eligible, to apply. It's first come, first serve. This, as the pandemic starts to wind down and we get out of the peacetime emergency, really important people have a plan to get caught up on those energy bills, because the next time you, currently the way it's set up, you would have to wait till next fall to apply. You have until May 31st for this season, and then the next applications would be due in the fall. So encourage you to, if you qualify, to apply sooner than later for this funds. Really important, helpful program. We'll go on to the next slide. I had alluded to that if you're eligible for energy assistance, you can also reach out for the Power On and Gas Affordability Program. These programs also include arrears forgiveness. So if you're behind on your bill, they set up a payment plan for you. And if you stick with that, they can relieve half of the debt that you've incurred on those past due bills. So really good, important, effective program. And then other sources of funding that could be used for energy bills. County assistance, the Salvation Army has program. Sometimes local social service agencies, like groups that do food banks or food shelves, will have funds available. Sometimes local houses of worship will have emergency funds for community members, and students can reach out to student services as well to see if they have assistance. There's also another round of housing funding that's going to be released for renters at the end of the month. So keep your eye out for that as well. That is another source of assistance that they had done one round previously, and now they're going to be introducing another round through the stimulus funding.
Hey, Carmen, we do have a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Which electrical items draw the most energy when off but still plugged in? I think Ann is talking about vampire draw.
Yes. It's hard to say what uses the most. It would really depend on kind of that unique appliance. Like older TVs come to mind as something that could potentially draw more power. I do want to say, like, these items don't draw tons of power, but they are still drawing power. So like if it's easy to shut them off or unplug them, we really encourage you to do that. Like, for example, I have a coffee maker. It doesn't need to be on all day. There's like a clock that, flashes. So I just literally unplug it after we're done using it for the day. So I would just kind of keep in mind, like, what's easy to unplug. I'm not going to unplug a microwave, right, all the time. That's not very convenient. But I have my entertainment center, my TV, DVD player, all this stuff on a power strip, and I literally shut the power strip off. So I just have to turn the power strip on before I can turn my TV off. But it's a couple steps to the TV, flip it, and it's all good to go. Phone chargers. Yes, you want to unplug your phone chargers. Also battery packs for laptops, like this big thing. That's still drawing power. So I shut my computer and I unplug it from the wall. Yeah. And I can see if I can find a little more information to share with you that gives some better examples too. Okay, great. And then we'll go on to the next slide, which is the thank you. And I just want to let you know that we are, every month we offer free energy bill consultation slots open for the public that you can go online and sign up for. So in March, we have one coming up on March 11th and also March 23rd. These take about 30 minutes. We track like the anticipated energy savings if people follow our suggestions. And we found that people on average would save $150 if they follow our suggestions. And a lot of these things are like behavioral, like we talked about, right? Adjusting things. So we think it's a pretty good use of 30 minutes. We do it over the phone or via video, whichever you prefer. And just ask that you send us copies of your bills ahead of time so we can talk about them. when we get back to in person, we'll literally sit across the table from you and do it that way too. So with that, I'm happy to stay for more questions. I appreciate all your time and attention and all the fabulous questions. Yeah, so I'll kind of let Mike and Drew take it from here in terms of if we want to stay on or if it's time to go.
I think it's fair to say we have time for some questions if anybody's interested or has a particular curiosity.
Yeah, and I'd say feel free to unmute yourself if you're comfortable with that too, now that we've gotten through the presentation. How often do vacuum refrigerator coils? Good question. I think like the number of pets has a good, how dusty your home is and how much like cat fur or dog hair might be rolling around. So, you know, probably like every 6 months as a starting point, and maybe more frequently if you you have a lot of furry friends depositing their fur. I know, like I have cat fur all over the place here. So yeah, great question. And also kind of know where those coils are. So some fridges have it in the back, and then some will be in front, like where you have to remove a piece. So just kind of know what you're getting into, and obviously be careful too with, you know, these things being heavy. So if that's a concern, get some help with that.
You know, one thing we did not talk about today, Carmen, is changing the filters on a forced air furnace.
Yes, thank you.
Which can really be helpful.
Yes, that is super important. And we suggest when you get your furnace service, talking to the technician who does that to let you know how often you should be doing that. Once a month is pretty typical, but it's not always necessary depending on what kind of filter and furnace you have. But it's super important for maintenance. It's also a good thing to check, like when we have the really extreme cold weather and your furnace might be struggling to keep up, checking to see if you have a dirty furnace can be a really quick fix to that. That actually happened to me, and I felt a little bit silly that I didn't think of that sooner, because I thought, oh, my filter can't possibly be dirty yet. And I switched it out, and then my furnace was just back up working the way it should have, where it was kind of struggling before. Yeah, that was like 2 years ago when we had a really cold snap.
I have a question about the relative energy savings of replacing particular appliances or light bulbs versus the cost to manufacture, or this energy it takes to manufacture them. So I'm trying to minimize my waste, and I'm wondering if I have, say, old halogen light bulbs, it'd be better to throw them away and get new energy ones, understanding that's a new material that has to be made and shipped. And same thing for things like an air conditioner or a refrigerator. Should I wait until the full life of that older product is over before I replace it, or should I replace it now?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So kind of the question is like this, trying to find this balance between really using up something versus kind of replacing it sooner than later to get the energy savings. And this is kind of one of those, dilemma, if that's too strong of a word, but one of those factors to think about when you're kind of holistically looking at environmental impact, right? What's the better choice? Because just like everything we do and consume has some sort of impact, and it's trying to find that right balance. So with the light bulbs, I have a little bit more of a clear advice on that. The LED light bulbs are so efficient. It takes less than a year to get your money back in savings, and they last several years. It's one of those instances where it's, in my mind, pretty clear, throw out that incandescent bulb sooner than later and replace it with an LED light bulb. The compact fluorescent light bulbs, the swirly ones that some of you may still have, those aren't quite as energy efficient as, I'm sorry, yes, they're a little less, they're less efficient than the LED light bulbs, but they're still quite efficient. So I guess that's just kind of a personal preference. They have to be recycled because of a trace of mercury in them. but when they do burn out, replace them with an LED. I wouldn't get another CFL with that. With some of these other items, when you think about like appliances and stuff, there's some calculators, and I can send links to those too. If you go to Energy Star on the Department of Energy website, you can calculate consumption of like different models of like refrigerators, for example. That's a good example. So you can do a little bit of research to be like, okay, this 15-year-old fridge consumes this much energy. I think it still has a few years left versus this brand new fridge, and that's how much that costs. And you know, kind of weigh your options and see from that standpoint what you think will be a good decision. But yeah, as consumers, we have to find this balance between kind of durability, lifespan, and energy usage. And ideally, you can find something that, you know, that maximizes both, but not always possible. Yeah, so I just encourage you to do research and then try to find the best solution. Because I sometimes give the example of like where people have a second fridge in the garage, right? It's that old fridge that they replaced, you know, 5 years ago, and that fridge is like 20 some years old. It might be actually costing you more to run it than it's really worth. You might be better off recycling that. But if you're using it, that's a different circumstance, right? But you can kind of do the math and see like, yeah, I'd actually be better off buying something newer that's more efficient and would pay for itself in X number of years.
Hey, Carmen, there are a few questions in the chat box, and one in particular is close to what you were talking about as you were walking us through electric bills. It says, I get emails frequently that compare my electric usage to my neighbors. Can you explain that comparison?
Yeah, okay, this is always a popular point of conversation when we do energy bill consultations. And I guess the thing I like about it is it gets people thinking about it, right? Like if they get that you know, your neighbors are so much better than you, they're wondering like, okay, what can I do? So it's kind of motivating. And if you get a message saying, okay, you're so much more efficient than your neighbors, you can like feel really good about that. The thing I have to say about that is that every household is unique. So that's why when we do the consultations, we're looking at your unique household and characteristics. So the house next door that could be almost exactly like yours, that household may have 2 people in it and you have 5. They may be non-COVID times, might be traveling 5 days of the week and you're home all the time, right? So there's like baseline data that's helpful, but there's a lot of unique characteristics to each household that's going to impact their energy use. So if your energy use is higher than your neighbors, it's probably a good idea to kind of think about it and, you know, self-examine and say, okay, are there some things I could be doing? But I also don't want you to jump to the conclusion of like, okay, we're totally off here, where your use might be very reasonable based on your household. So encourage you to kind of reach out to us and we can go over there and identify where there's opportunities to save and where it's just kind of like, yep, that's just the way your home is. And like another good example that you can all relate to now, being many of you being at home more, is like when people retire, their bills usually go up because again, they're home more, right? So all these factors influence how much energy we're consuming.
And there are a couple of other questions that actually all have to do with products that have heating coils at different wattages, I suppose. Are electric irons as bad as space heaters for energy consumed? Anything with a heating coil, including toaster ovens? I would take a stab at that, but what do you think, Carmen?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit and I'll pass it on to you because I'm not an expert in all of these individual appliances, but I can say you can figure out how much energy they're using. You can go to the library and rent what's called a kilowatt meter and actually plug things in and measure its use. There's also some websites that give you kind of a good idea of how much energy is consumed. The thing is, it's really about like how long you're using these things, right? So you're not gonna, unless you're doing a lot of laundry, you're not gonna be ironing all day long. So maybe, you know, relatively speaking, it uses uses a lot of watts, but it's only gonna be on, you know, for a short amount of time. Things like toaster ovens, that's actually kind of one of the tips we give, like using microwaves and toaster ovens is gonna use less energy than like using a full oven. So if you just, I don't know, have something like a pot pie or something to cook, you don't necessarily have to use a big full oven. If you have a toaster oven, you could just use something smaller. A toaster, we eat a lot of toaster strudel at our house, so that goes in the toaster oven and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a lot about the length of use as much as how much energy it's using. So Mike, I'll let you comment too.
Carmen, I would say the same thing. If I have to iron as long as I need to have a space heater on, I have got the wrong clothes. Yeah, absolutely. There is another question here too. Does anyone have feedback on standard fabric furnace filters versus electrostatic filters in terms of efficiency?
I'm sorry, I don't have the expertise to comment on that.
As a former Home Energy Squad consultant, I can tell you that I can share what I learned while I was doing that. Stepping back for just a minute, you know, when many of us were younger, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, forced air furnaces had filters. And the purpose of those filters was to protect the blower motor inside the furnace. And then a few smart folks from places like 3M said, you know, we could get a lot of cat dander and dog fur and all the rest of that stuff out of the air if we made those filters a little thicker or changed the composition of what they're made from. And so there was a sort of a bit of an explosion in furnace filters and what they could do. So stepping back a little bit further then, the industry developed a rating system called MERV, and I used to recall what that stood for. But think of Merv Griffin when you go filter shopping. The score, the MERV score for a filter can range from 1 to 16, and the recommendation is that feel free to use anything you want, but past 8. That's about where you start to see a difference in energy efficiency. Think of the furnace as like you have 2 glasses in front of you, and one has water and the other has a chocolate shake, and you have straws of exactly the same size. What's going to take more energy to drink, right? That's what a filter does. As far as electrostatic filters are concerned, they do a tremendous job of cleaning the air and getting all of that stuff out of the particulate matter out of the air. They do use a little bit of electricity, but in a situation like that, the benefit is much cleaner indoor air. So you need to make a decision as to whether or not that's worth a little bit of extra energy to run those.
Great. Looks like there's another. Let's see. Big energy savings in summer if you use air dry feature of your dishwasher. I mean, again, I wouldn't say big savings, but some savings. This is, again, that's kind of one of these examples of it's easy to do. Just pop your door open and let it air dry. Yeah, I think this is kind of like a personal preference, convenience thing. I'm just really on the side of like, if it's easy to do and doesn't impact your comfort, just do it. Every little bit adds up. But speaking of air drying, you know, I spoke to someone who was just amazing at being efficient. And I love this tip she gave me because she was super efficient. With the dryer, she wouldn't completely dry her clothes. She'd get them like for towels a little bit in the dryer to fluff them up. And then she'd hang everything else out. And I thought, okay, that's pretty impressive. And so when on your dryer, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but if you reduce the heating setting, and even if the dryer has to run a little bit longer, you're going to use less energy. So for example, I dry my stuff on medium, and then a lot of times I'll take out things that are a little bit damp and hang them up, like the heavier things, like a towel. And then the rest of the stuff is usually pretty dry already. So those are, again, just little tips here and there that can help a bit. Great. Any other last questions? I'm really appreciate all these great questions and all the participation tonight. This is very fun. And I encourage you to reach out to us with any other questions, and I'll be in touch with Drew too to send some more info.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Carmen, for answering all those questions and all that information. I know I learned a lot. So just a last thing before we close up here for the night. So we learned a little bit today about our bills, and next we're going to talk a bit about waste. And I think it sort of falls in that same realm where it's going to be there's little things that you can do to reduce the amount of waste that you make. And every little bit counts. I know the name for our guest, as you can see on the screen, is Zero Waste West Metro, but don't let that intimidate you. I've spoken to our presenters, and they are all about just doing what works for you. Doesn't mean you have to be zero waste. So our next one's going to be on Tuesday, April 6th, same time, 6 p.m. That one's going to be a little bit longer. We're probably looking at like an hour and a half, maybe a little bit more for a presentation. But with that, I'll close it up. And if you have any other questions, feel free to send them to me, and I will either respond to them or I'll connect you with Carmen for them. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your night.